Let's go live now to Warren Hogan. He is the UTS Economics Professor, former ANZ Chief Economist. Warren, as always, appreciate your time. This week we've got one of the most important pieces of legislation to go to the Parliament, really since World War II, with that wage subsidy program.
Yeah, we certainly do, and it's absolutely critical they get it put in place because this policy is all about speed. Urgency is the critical element here, and I completely agree with many of the commentators out there and people actually in the debate working it out that there can be some tweaks, but there's no chance of making this a perfect policy tool. And it won't be fair. I mean, the principle of fairness the Prime Minister has already made quite clear, that's $1,500 for everybody. But you start digging around too much in fairness and it'll become impossible to get this in place quickly. And of course it's temporary. We want to get rid of this thing as soon as we can. So the critical element is speed, and I think maybe looking at the $1 billion turnover threshold, that's creating some problems because I think bigger business are the real risk now in the economy. But there are constraints, and that is this thing is really expensive. 130 billion over 6 months is approximately 35% of all private sector wages in this economy. So you know there's a limit to what the government can do.
But I guess if you are going to go so hard and it's such a massive expenditure, why not save a few thousand extra jobs if that threshold that you talked about, that $1 billion turnover, if they just put it across the board, 30% flat rate?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and you're exactly right. If the extra cost of that is, you know, measured in the hundreds of millions, it's or even a couple of billion, it's irrelevant to the total cost of the program and may enhance the effectiveness. I mean, the ultimate aim here, apart from putting a floor under incomes, creating a basic income for all Australians through this really incredibly difficult period, is to keep people connected to their employers so that we can get this thing going quickly and get rid of the wage subsidy quickly. So I think you're right there, Kieran, that they should just move on that one.
What about the short-term economic situation, Warren? Given what we heard in the health sense from Paul Kelly and in Andrew's report there about his confidence that we might be starting to see a flattening of the curve, what are the implications then for the short-term economic scenario?
Yeah, I think now is the first time we can really sort of draw a bit of a breath and have a think about what the operating environment is for the next few months, given that the health situation seems to be stabilising and given that the government's sort of raft of policy packages seem to have been put in place or will be put in place, and we don't see anything imminently coming down the pipeline. So my read on it is that we're going to see about a 5 to 10% drop in economic activity now, and that'll remain the case while the social distancing restrictions remain in place through, I'd say, at least the next 3 months that we can think about. And of course, the key to sort of how severe this is going to be, apart from the health issues, but in terms of the economy, is where the unemployment rate goes. We've had a survey of economists, bank economists today, which the consensus is around 8–9%. It'll rise to by June. There's a variability of opinion there. I think it could get to 11. But the reality is we're all guessing. We're doing some numbers, but we don't have any reliable evidence to go off just yet. And we'll get those numbers. And that's really the key here is that we've got this depressed economic environment while these health considerations are in play. And then the degree to which this hampers our ability to get out of this will be all about the dislocation in the employment markets, I believe.
Okay, so you've got employment as one area of concern. You touched on the bigger businesses, another. Are there other areas of concern that jump out at you right now as we are at the early stages, really, of dealing with this pandemic?
Well, that's right. We are. This is 3 or 4 weeks into the sort of emergency environment, and we've got a long way to go. And I think the government's done a fantastic job in shoring up households' incomes and SMEs. I think we've got to turn our attention to bigger businesses now, hence the $1 billion threshold around the wage subsidy is in play. And I think that means that the banking system is going to bear a huge amount of pressure. They're going to have a huge responsibility, the banks, for working out how to keep businesses going that are basically insolvent or illiquid, and they've got moratoriums in place. But they've got a role to play in determining who survives over the longer term and who doesn't, because they're lending them the money. And I think that banking system and how it mixes with the big business is the real risk for us. And we'll get a better insight into that because businesses are working madly to shore themselves up. And I'm sure we're going to see more and more announcements about how they're doing that, whether that involves job losses and, of course, whether that involves how well that business, whether it can make it or not. We've got a number of retailers that are essentially on the sidelines, and who knows if they'll open again. So I think it's that banking financial issue that really is the concern now.
And just before I let you go quickly, the RBA meets tomorrow. What should we expect from the central bank?
Well, they've got the rate down to 0.25%, and that's the low. They're not going any lower. They've told us that. So we're really looking for their views on how they think this is impacting the economy. They've got some of the best economists, best analysts up there around. From an economic point of view, they're the equivalent of our government health experts. So getting their views on where the economy is going is critical, not just to the markets, but to business and the community at large to get an understanding of this. So getting that statement. Then the other thing also is they've got a huge role to play here in helping the government fund these programs. That is, the government will issue bonds, get debt together to pay for the deficit. But if there's any problems in those markets, the RBA is the one who's got to stand in there and support the government bond market. And any insights into how they're going to do that and their appetite for doing that, I think will be critical tomorrow.
Warren, appreciate your insights as always. Warren Hogan, we'll talk to you soon.